So, first, two disclaimers. Secondly, I haven't done the first one yet. The first one is I'm controlling a presentation with an iPad for the first time, and they only just finished solving technical issues about 30 seconds ago, so I might add to them. We'll see. And number two, I've unfortunately got a cold, so I'm not as good as I hope to be, so please bear with me. I'm also pleased to see there's a few other talks on this same sort of topic throughout the next 2 days, because mine is not very practical. I think the others are more practical. Mine is more kind of what I like to do, dream about crazy ideas and come up with weird presentations to talk about them. And if you have more interest, we could talk some more or go and see some other talks. With those out the way, I'm going to start with letting you into a little secret. I had a bit of a problem with this talk. A lot of presenters, well, me anyway, I like to think that other presenters are a bit like this. We actually quite often have an idea for a talk, submit it to a conference, then it gets accepted, and then about 3 months after that, we suddenly realize we need to write a talk, and then have a massive panic when we realize that what we proposed doesn't really make sense, and you weren't really sure what you were going to say 3 months earlier, and you start to struggle, and you do it all at the last minute. I really pretty much, quite honestly, I'm not trying to lie to you here, only really kind of had a clear idea about what I wanted this talk to be about 2 days ago. So, to help me, seeing as we're talking about artificial intelligence, I thought I would ask a few friends. So firstly, I tried Google Assistant. I asked Google Assistant, is artificial intelligence a friend or a foe for technical writers? This wasn't massively helpful to me. It kind of mixed up a few terms, but not really what I wanted to know. So I asked it a different question. I got some fairly negative responses here, getting a little bit more helpful maybe. And I tried another one. Again, this wasn't particularly helpful. It's kind of mixing up the terms, but not really the specific term I was looking for. So this wasn't massively helpful to me. I tried one more. Will technical writing be automated? Again, this sort of talking about it and some other things, but this is from Reddit. I don't know, Reddit isn't always reliable. So Google didn't really help me. So I tried another friend. I tried Alexa. Alexa actually couldn't tell me anything, which I was quite surprised about. I don't know quite what the problem was. Maybe Alexa's only useful for switching on lights and asking to tell you jokes, because it couldn't help me with this talk at all. Surprisingly, Siri was actually much more useful. I mean, it normally isn't, but it gave me some fairly similar responses to Google Assistant, but actually some more links to look at, some similar content, some fairly well-respected sites there as well. And again, with a similar question, I think the question got cut off there. But again, we have some similar responses, not massively helpful. I'm still none the wiser here. Should I be worried about artificial intelligence? Should I be worried about machine learning? Not really sure. So it wasn't really any the wiser, and all this just focused on the negative. I suppose I asked a fairly negative question, but it only really focused on the negative. So I thought, okay, I've got to go this alone. I've got to be the human here. I can't rely on the machine. So I came up with a few ideas to start looking at the title. And if it is true, if artificial intelligence and machine learning is something we should be worried about, how can we take advantage of that? We're human beings. We are best at being flexible. How can we take advantage of things that may change? So, one final caveat before we get started. I will use AI, or artificial intelligence, to mean quite a few different things that aren't always strictly artificial intelligence. Not everything I'm going to cover really is artificial intelligence, and to be honest with you, this is often used as a marketing trick by lots of these companies anyway. Quite often things that claim to be artificial intelligence aren't really anyway, so I'm in good company using sometimes the wrong terms. But it's just easier to use that one term as we go through. All right, first, bots are kind of one of the main areas we might have encountered forms of artificial intelligence. I did a talk last year here at SOAP, and that was, if you want more detail, you can go and find that talk. Not a lot from that talk about actually writing for bots has really changed that much, but the industry has changed. This is the famous Gartner hype cycle. I would probably say chatbots and voice interfaces are kind of here at the moment. The hype is over, and this is a very optimistic hype cycle. There's always the assumption it will keep going. It could, of course, just come right off. We don't really know right now. So the industry has changed even since last year. But this is interesting, though, because it's actually a better opportunity for people like us. Because when a technology starts to mature, it's actually typically the time that there is a call for people like us, technical writers, people who can explain and polish output from developers. So actually, even though the hype cycle is running out, it might be no better time for us to get involved. And similar with voice assistants. They're kind of reaching their peak popularity. They're still yet to kind of really break through in Europe. Some of that is language. Some of that is we're more concerned over privacy. But the interesting thing with them is what you can now do with them is more complicated. You can now have more context-driven conversations, conversations that continue. You can have different people in the conversation, mixture of languages in a conversation. So what is actually possible is way more than it was last year. And the other interesting thing here is, I think, somewhere, I thought somewhere on this hype cycle, but now I can't see it. Typically at this point in time is when enterprise companies or people building applications for enterprise companies start to be the main creators and users of these sorts of technologies. And this is another positive for people like us, because these are not scrappy startups with a little bit of funding. They're companies with money. They're companies with the time and resources to want to, again, hire people like us to help create good products, not just things that are kind of come and go very, very quickly to please a hype cycle. So now is possibly never a better time to get involved with writing for conversational interfaces, which is kind of the catch-all term we can use for chatbots and voice interfaces. And writing for conversational interfaces involves, let's say I did a full talk on this last year, but in summary, short, concise text. It's a conversation. If someone talks for a long time, like I'm doing right now, you're probably going to switch off listening at a certain point. It involves understanding user context and journey, what people are trying to do, where they are in that journey of trying to do it. It involves things like variables, names, locations, addresses, IDs, all sorts of things. It involves not only user profiles, like the traditional profile that we use to form our user stories, but also, again, feeding into the variables. This means getting information about a particular user. It involves lots and lots of API calls and returns from API calls. And it involves working very closely with developers. Now, maybe some of you, it's only 9:30, are going, hang on a minute. This sounds somewhat familiar. That sounds like technical writing. So, actually, we're doing a lot of this already. So if you feel like trying something slightly different from doing pure documentation and maybe shorter, more conversational type writing, this is still a valid opportunity for people like us. The text is mostly generative, but someone still has to write it. And especially if maybe you've ever wanted to try writing fiction or interactive fiction or storytelling, this is a really nice time to kind of take your technical writing skills and do something a bit more with them. So it's still a field worth investigating. There's now kind of more established companies that can hopefully offer you work for the foreseeable future. So it's still a good time a year later to be involved with this. Whilst we're on this subject, let's delve a little into natural language processing. This is not necessarily the same as chatbots and voice interfaces. Sometimes more advanced chatbots and voice interfaces, especially the voice assistants, will use natural language processing, but other products also use natural language processing, not just these conversational interfaces. So, and I guess my writing hat took me into an interest in chatbots. And then I wanted to start looking at natural language processing. I wanted to start looking into natural language processing so I could learn more about doing more advanced things with bots. This then takes you into the world of linguistics, the study of language, which is a really fascinating subject, actually. And in my mind, kind of circles you right back into technical writing again, because we're often being very precise with our language. I'm going to use a little bit of a sort of silly comparison here. This is Noam Chomsky, a very famous linguist. A lot of people know him for his politics, but actually, his real job is as a very well-known linguist, possibly one of the best in the modern era. Linguists care about the technicalities of language, the structures of language, the constructs of language, etc. What about technical writers? This is possibly the most famous technical writer from the not very flattering Dilbert comic, but anyway, it's probably the most famous one I could think of, cares about technical language. I'm being a little bit silly here, but it's a bit of a tenuous connection. But technicalities of language, technical language, all right, okay, seriously. So language is actually very technical. English is a kind of somewhat vague, messy language, but other languages have much more structure to them and are sometimes much more interesting to study in terms of structure. Languages like Finnish, for example. And not only can we learn a lot from linguists, because understanding the technicalities of language actually can help your writing too, but the other interesting opportunity here for us is that a lot of the linguists working in very heavy natural language processing-based applications are mostly from academic backgrounds. So, academics are often very used to working in universities and educational places where everyone kind of speaks the same way. And sometimes when they're in product companies or technical companies, the way they're used to interacting with people is not necessarily the way that these companies operate. So, again, someone that can understand language and talk to technical people. This sounds a lot like us again, doesn't it? I think there's another interesting opportunity here to sit in the middle of these people who understand how to process language programmatically, but then we can take it and explain it to developers as well, and how it can interact with code and APIs, and also how to construct a perfect sentence with all of that. So I think here is another interesting opportunity for us. I don't know if there are any companies doing this yet, I'm not sure, but I would be interested in finding out. Next, in the past, I spoke at some other events about prototype ideas for having a bot for documentation. And these are actually, it was kind of just an idea, and then in the past couple of years, this has become more and more of an option, as companies have actually started releasing tools to make this a possibility. So in some cases, it's basically just a glorified search to documentation. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. If more and more people like using bots to interact with applications, and that's the way they want to do it, then that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I tried a couple, just to see how useful they might be to us right now. So first, I tried Freshdesk. This is actually an example from one I am trying with a client of mine. Freshdesk is predominantly a support platform. It only works with Freshdesk content, which maybe isn't massively useful. It's mostly question and answer style content. So this is basically, I ask a question and it searches through the information it has in Freshdesk to get an answer. There is an API, so in theory, you could populate it with content from other sources via the API. I haven't tried it yet to see how useful that could be. It seems like a lot of work. It needs training. The training is actually quite nice. So for example, here you see, I said, how do I install? These first two are kind of, well, I just know in my mind, these first two are related to installing. This third one isn't really. It's not really related to it. So I can actually go into a dashboard and see the questions asked and the responses it gave and said, no, this wasn't correct, that should be matched to this, etc., etc. So you can train it over time. And like many, many applications that use machine learning, training, the interesting thing here is that computer applications actually need a lot of training. 20, 30 articles is not enough. They actually need usually hundreds. So they do need a lot of training to get right. Then I looked at IBM Watson. This Watson is a very, very interesting application. It's fairly mature. It's actually fairly smart. This particular feature is very new. And it's only available on premium plans, or you can test it. But as we'll see in a minute, that wasn't necessarily very helpful to me. It can page scrape. You could give it a website, and it will scrape the page content and populate its database with that page content. Watson's natural language processing is excellent. I mean, it's been around for quite a long time. But this is as far as I got. And last time I checked, it was still doing this. And I don't know if that's a problem with the web page, the fact I didn't have a premium account, I was trying to use it in the wrong way. I don't really know. So up until this point, it seemed very promising. But it is new, so I may go back and try it another time. I'm not sure. Q&A Maker from Microsoft. The formats are limited. I actually found this with quite a few things. So I come from what is now mostly termed this docs as code kind of background. I don't really work with PDF manuals, DITA, these sorts of technologies. So to me, my documentation is either Markdown, restructured text, HTML, things like that. This may or may not suit you because it mostly accepted things like CSV, JSON files, and PDFs. So I tested it with a PDF. I tested it with an old computer game manual. It's just the first thing that I found on my computer, called Syndicate, if anyone's old enough to remember that game. So it's kind of Q&A only. As the name suggests, it's called Q&A Maker. I mean, it's somewhat obvious. And it has some quite good basic NLP. So I uploaded this PDF. I asked a question, how do I begin a mission? I wasn't able to create the actual bot because I got stuck in Microsoft Azure and its many control panels of hell. So I just did the a REST query instead. And you can see it takes me to this page here, begin mission. Pretty good. Didn't take me that long. I couldn't really plug it into anything helpful to me. Just a board game, a computer game manual to test it. But it works relatively quickly, actually. If this suits your formats and suits your style, then it's pretty quick to get started with. I also looked at Dialogflow from Google. Dialogflow itself is, again, a very complex application. You can do a lot with it. This new feature, which is the knowledge feature, I think, is new. Again, it's very new. So all of these are very new. I couldn't have spoken about any of these apart from Q&A Maker, I think, last year. It's mostly aimed at FAQ content. Again, you can actually import different types of content, FAQ pages, which are mostly structured like you can see here, very clear questions and answers on a page, on one page, so for an FAQ section. You can also feed it pages, again, like Watson, the scraper. And basically, if you can use other Google tools. I mean, Google has built its entire business on page scraping and indexing websites, so you would expect it works quite well. You can use their traditional webmaster tools to check your site and see how well it will work in Dialogflow. Again, I got somewhat stuck, mostly because all it lets you do is pick FAQ content or scraping your web pages. You can't have a mixture. So again, I didn't find it massively useful for my use case. You could see here, we had one FAQ page. It's not really an FAQ page, but it was just a good test page because it has questions and answers. Can't quite see it, but over here, I kind of have to pretty much type something relating to one of these questions, and I get this response, this one here. But the interesting thing with this is Dialogflow is a whole product in itself. So it has lots of integration options with input and output. So once this kind of matures, this could be a very interesting option, but not sure yet. So, are these useful? Probably not right now. They're probably more for testing. And at the moment, mostly for searching and finding FAQs. Kind of, as I say, just a glorified search. But they're moving quite quickly, so they're worth keeping an eye on. But the interesting thing to note with a lot of these is they're actually mostly useful for handling the types of documentation that support that you are using. The kind of question and answers that support people often get. And often documentation writers are, one of the best metrics we have of success is how is it helping or not support, because this is where we kind of get feedback from what we've done or not. So the Freshdesk example I showed, we were actually testing this for one of the clients I have. The support people get asked a lot of the same questions all the time, and they spend a lot of time on answering these same questions over and over again. And so we're testing this with some of those to see if it can reduce the amount of time they have to answer these repetitive questions, which is what a machine is good at, and they can spend most of their time on the more complex questions that a human is good at. So this is sort of the gap they're trying to fill right now, which may or may not be useful to you, but we'll see if they can be more useful in the future. The other problem is, as we kind of saw, they're somewhat disconnected right now. We basically either have searching frequently asked questions or like natural language processing on page scraping, and not kind of a lot in the middle right now. But I guess in the long run, these will be systems and services that help connect users to the right documentation. So it's important for us to be involved with these because we want people to be taken to the right information. We want the right information to be inside of them. And I do believe there is a talk tomorrow that will probably go into more detail on how you can do that. So if this interests you, pop along to that talk. So I'm guessing, hopefully you found it all very interesting, and you kind of want to know the answer to this question right now. I don't think it's going to look like that, but anyway. Well, as always, with everything technical, you know what the answer is going to be. It depends. It depends who you talk to, depends what you're doing, all sorts of things. So, this is a famous-ish screenshot that came out about 2 years ago from the website Will Robots Take My Job? Technical writers, 89% apparently. Don't worry too much. Chance within the next 2 decades, so a little bit of time yet. Some of us, this will affect more than others, maybe. But is this the whole story? So I took a look at US statistics, are always easy to come by. At the moment, between 2016 and 2026, there's an 11% increase in demand for technical writer jobs. I don't know about you as well, but I've found in Europe at the moment, I've never seen so many adverts for technical writer jobs. There is now an interest in these companies that have built very technical products who want someone who can understand the technology and explain it to people. There's still a lot of demand for this right now. So whether this will end up being true or not kind of remains to be seen, how good a job we do and what people start to make, I guess. So the opinions are mixed right now. Most people say that the jobs where we are more human in, the more creative jobs, the more jobs where we have to be flexible are the less likely to be replaced. So I would like to think that as the demand for kind of more narrative and more narrative-driven and human tech writing increases, which in my experience it has been, the chances of us being replaced by automation decreases. So if you're already writing more human-style content, there's a strong likelihood you're going to be safer for longer. And if you're not, then maybe now's the time to start. But as another quick example, let's look at some related fields. So this is a robo-journalist. Journalists, strangely, according to the same website, so maybe we shouldn't believe it, say only 11% chance of being replaced, which is not true, because they've already been replaced in certain fields. So maybe we shouldn't worry too much about that 89%, because this isn't accurate. Let's have a little look at some things that have happened over the past few years to certain journalists. So in certain fields of journalism, where it's mostly about numbers and statistics and facts reporting, so financial journalism and sports journalism especially, who, I hate to say it, whether if you're into financial news or sports news, it is basically just this thing happened, that thing happened, etc. It's quite easy for automation. So this is from the Washington Post, and this is from a few years ago. So even a couple of years ago, it had already written 300 short reports on the Rio Olympics. And this isn't the only one. There are other publications doing this already, and the humans just come in to polish what the machine creates. All right, this is fine. And here's some other examples here. We even have Wibbits that creates videos, which is kind of worrying. And NewsTracer from Reuters, which is a little different. It doesn't really write the news. It kind of filters the news that the writers should write about. So it's actually like having a robot as a boss instead. So I thought I would try some of these. Now, the interesting thing here is that a lot of them only let you try them if you pay. I didn't want to pay, so we got limited results. So this is Articloo. Firstly I thought I'd try a non-technical topic. I tried best tourist cities, and I got an article about India, which I'm sure has some good tourist cities, but it's not quite what I asked for. Also, if you read it, it's okay. I mean, if you were just quickly browsing through websites, you'd probably find it all right, but it's not fantastic. It's okay. So I thought I'd try a more technical copy. That's what we're here to find out. I tried install MongoDB on Kubernetes. Maybe I was going a little bit too extreme, too quickly. No, it just said, can't write that. So I thought, I'll try something a bit simpler. How about using a REST API? Nope. How about something that's a little less kind of opinionated and a bit more, this is how you do it? Install Ruby on Rails. Nope. Didn't like that either. So I think, according to this website, then there's nothing to worry about quite right now. But there are other options. So I tried a site called Article Generator. So firstly, it only asks for one word, which is a little odd. I tried travel, and I got these, which is a little different. It's not quite what I'd expect from travel. It's a little different, but I guess it's reasonably accurate. It's reasonably current. So then I thought I would try something technical again. I tried JavaScript, and I got this. So it's basically just marketing copy. So again, nothing really to worry about there right now. Yeah. So I guess we're okay right now. I think it looks like it for the time being. One more thing, though. One more thing on this. And I still have plenty of time, but I know they won't mind if I get us back on track a little bit. So one more little thing. And maybe this is a little bit paranoid of me. Are we feeding the machine? Are we actually bringing about our own end? So I spend a lot of time promoting tools that help you write better, especially, and there's especially SAS options like Grammarly, Hemingway, and Google Docs now has a grammar checker too since February, where it will recommend improving your writing. I'm actually more of a fan of the open source linter style tools where the human is in control. But with these SAS products, they're telling us how to improve our writing. Are they learning as we do this? Are we actually just training machines to replace us the more we use these tools? I don't know. Google is not particularly well known for not using things to train other devices. If you've ever seen a captcha, that's basically training image recognition. Hemingway, I don't know. Grammarly was controversial recently because someone came across their privacy policy, and it quite clearly says, we do what we want with your content. So who knows? I don't know. We spend a lot of time now in certain companies writing for SEO. Why do we write for SEO? We write for SEO so content can be digested by a machine, and so a machine can understand it. Short, sharp sentences stuffed with keywords. Again, are we feeding the machine? I don't know. So all of this is kind of potentially slightly concerning to us. Should we stop using so many of these tools? Should we start being more human again? Otherwise, we might be bringing about our own end. Indeed, are we writing for machines not to find, but to learn from? So, in conclusion, I think the future, and this is not unique to our field, the future is automation plus humans. I think most of the industry knows this, most of the industry wants this. Machines can do a lot of things better than us, and we can do a lot of things better than machines. So for the time being at least, and probably in our work lifetimes anyway, the future will be us working with the machines to do what we're both good at. But I would probably say, unless there's a major revolution, it's somewhat unavoidable. So stay flexible. learn, stay interested, and stay human. And I hope throughout this presentation that's kind of what I've tried to show you, that the more human you are, the less chance you have of being replaced by the machine, and instead the machine is working for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Do you have questions to this guy? I promise we will give away some soap for you that you can use to wash your hands with if you ask questions. That's still valid. No questions? Okay, maybe they just want to. But that's a question to me, not to Chris.
Let's see your hands. Yeah, all right, yeah.
Okay. Can we get some soap to this lady? That was a question and Chris approved, so I have no choice. Okay. Okay then, you guys. I guess they just want to chat with you during their coffee break.
It wasn't necessarily a presentation that posed questions to be asked anyway. It gave you lots of things to think about, maybe. So.
Oh yeah, okay. Okay, so you guys think about it, and if you come up with any questions, Chris will be here. Thank you so much, Chris, for opening our conference this year.
Oops.
Yep. How about a big applause to Chris for starting with us?